Hi, welcome to our Gemara Shir. We are back on track. Shabbos Kodesh. We are learning Masechet Shabbos. Bezos Hashem. Towards the end, Kuf Nun Hey Amud Beis, towards the bottom of the page. The topic we've been studying in the past few days was feeding animals on Shabbos. This is still the topic at the beginning of this year, feeding your animals on Shabbos. And afterwards, we're going to deal with a very important and rather intricate melacha called lash, kneading on Shabbos. That will be the main part of the shir. But first, let's start with the Gemara's few lines of Aggadah regarding animals' eating habits. This year, like all my other shiurim, is dedicated with love in memory of my father, Menachem ben Akiva, and for the quick release of all the hostages. Dosh Rabbi Yoino, Apischa de Beinisia. Rabbi Yoino gave a drasha, explained the pasuk by the Pesach, by the door of the Nasi, of the leader of Klal Yisrael back then. What does it mean when it says Yudea Tzadik Din Dalim? What does it mean when it says that Tzadik knows the din of the Dalim? Yudea Tzadik Din Dalim. A Tzadik knows the din of the poor ones. Pashup Pshat, the Tzadik is aware of the needs of the poor people. But there's an inner layer, there's another understanding to that pasuk. Yodea Kadosh Baruch Hu bekelev shemazenoisav mu'otin. Kadosh Baruch Hu knows that people don't like to feed dogs. In today's society, a lot of people like to feed their own dogs. But the dog that lives in the street dogs, who's looking at them? Nobody cares about them. And the dogs, they are constantly hungry. And people don't like to feed them as much. Lefikach shoya chilosa b'me'av gimel yomim. Hashem planned it that way. Hashem designed the anatomy and the nature of the dog that the dog stays satisfied for 3 days. In other words, it takes a long time for a dog to actually digest his food completely. It takes 3 days. Yeah, there are 3 days until the dog fully digests the whatever he eats. Kedetnan. And there is an afkamina lahalacha. There's the Mishnah regarding Tuma Vitara, a Mishnah in Oholos that exemplifies that. It says something very interesting over there. Kama tisha chilosa b'meyav v'hiyeh tomeh. Before we start to explain the Mishnah, let me give you the introduction. What happens if a dog eats a person? Sorry, not so nice. Let's say the dog is so ferocious, maybe ate a dead person who's already dead. Okay. Now the dog has pieces of dead body in his stomach. And the dog himself died. Now the dog is in an ohel, is in a closed room, house. And we all know that a house is mekabel tuma. Meaning, if you have a dead person in a house, as long as the person is there, even one kazais from the mace in the ohel is metame. Anybody else in the ohel, in the same room, same house, same vicinity, become tome. So now that dog who's with the dead body inside the dog, the fact that the dead body is inside the dog does make a difference because the dead body is still there. And the tumor goes through the dead dog's body. Meaning, if the dog was alive, then the dead body that's inside of it, the dead remains of the body, the dead pieces of dead person, those, if it was inside a live dog, wouldn't make a difference. Because a live dog is not metame, and whatever is inside is like, tofel, is part of is part of the dog, that's okay, a live one. A live animal is never metame. But if the dog is dead, and inside the stomach of the dog there are pieces, kazais, of a dead person, it still projects tuma to the ohel all around. So kamatasha chilosa b'mea v'yotome. How many days are you still concerned? For how many days, for how long are you still concerned that the dead body is still fresh and not digested, and therefore it's metame everything that's around it? Because once the dead body is already completely decayed and all eaten up, all already peptic acid inside the dog, already excrement, whatever. It's not metame anymore. How long? Bekelev gimel yomi meisleis. Oh, by a dog, it's 3 days times 24 hours. Meisleis. From the time the dog ate it, three meisleises, 3 sets of 24 hours, that the dog is still metame, whatever is inside the dog, because the dog did not digest it completely. That's the idea. On the other hand, the other extreme, if let's say an off, some bird of prey or dogim, fish, if they are in an ohel and they ate a piece of person, a dead person, they digest it very quickly. Yeah, the amount of time it takes for something to fall into the fire and burn, that's a few seconds or minutes. It's very, very soon. Amar Vimnuna, Shmamina, from the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of the dogs and wants to feed them, i.e., keep the food inside for 3 days, we have to follow the ways of Hashem. And what should we do? Orach Ara, it is Derech Eretz. Orach Ara lemishda umtza lekalba. It's a nice thing to do for the stray dog, yeah, for the dog, the street dog, yeah, it's a good thing, derech eretz, to throw mishda umtza lekalba, to throw the piece of meat to the dog. V'kama, how much? Now we're a little bit conflicted, because on one hand, you have Rachmanis in the dog, just like Hashem does. On the other hand, you don't want that street dog to start following you for many reasons, yeah? Not a Jewish thing, not hygienic, not good, not, you don't want the street dog to become too dependent on you and just stick to you and come back to you for more and more food. You're not looking not to own a dog. So v'kama, how much meat should you give it that should be enough but should not create dependency? Omar of Mari, meshach udnei, meaning give it the size of the udnei, the size of the ear of the dog. V'chutra basrei, then hit him with a stick, give him a little bit of a hit, meaning I gave you a little bit, go away. Yeah, I'm not your tzedakah fund. And even that is only true when the street dog is not in the street. Is bedabra, is in the field, far away from where you live, no, outside, out of town. Aval b'mata loy. But if the dog is in town where you live, the same, neighborhood where your house is, don't give him the small piece in your house, or even near your house in the town, in your neighborhood. The also Misrach, as we said, is going to start following you again and again, like listarech. Yeah, you may come to, he's going to come to Lamisrach. Rashi says one reason not to have the dog coming to you again and again, even if you like dogs and you're okay with having the dog around you, but it's going to cost you a lot of geld. You're giving him a nice piece of meat, a nice piece of raw steak. He's going to ask for more and more and more, start barking and giving you a hard time, and you won't be able to afford it. And therefore, yeah, you only give him a small piece, only out of the vicinity, out of your neighborhood, and out of town, and give him a bit of a shock, a hit to make sure, I give you once, all over, and now go to another person. Amar of Popet. Now Rav Pop is making another interesting statement. Leis de anya mikalba, v'leis de atir michazira. There's nobody as poor as a dog, v'leis de atir michazira, and nobody as rich as a pig. What does that mean? The kalba, as we said, the street dogs, people don't like feeding them. Unless you own a dog, and halachically, it's not simple to own a dog. You have to know what kind of dog, not a scary one, v'chulei. Yeah, but normally the street dog people don't like to feed, and therefore dogs are always hungry and poor. A chazir, a pig, people feed the pig. I mean, not Jewish people maybe, fine, but lamaisa pig is owned by whoever owns it, and people feed it. And also the pig likes eating everything. Because the pig is such a baltaiva, the pig eats and eats and eats and eats, and mimele it's always rich, meaning it's not mistapik bemuat, but he eats anything that comes his way, so he's rich. In other words, he's always well fed. He's well fed, the chazir. I saw a very nice idea that they said B'Shem the Gaon Vilna doesn't sound so much the style of the Gaon. I saw it quoted as said by the Gaon. He says there are two isurim. One isur Torah, two isurim that have to do with the mouth, lashon hara and treif, eating treif. Leith de anya mekalba. Lashon hara is exemplified by a dog. It says in Psachim Daf Kuf Yud Ches that whoever speaks lashon hara, his oynish should be to be thrown into the ferocious dogs. That's not done, but you should know he should be thrown to the dog's den, if he speaks lashon hara. Leith de anya mekalba, meaning, unfortunately, lashon hara is a very sadly a lot of us, it's hard for people to refrain from lashon hara. So that prohibition is very poor, meaning not many people keep that the halachas of lashon hara. So it's poor. When it comes to treif food, that's a very rich iser. Everybody knows not to eat chazir. Even many secular people, Baruch Hashem, they don't eat chazir. So the rich iser, the iser that is very well accepted in Jewish society, in Jewish by us, by Yidden, is chazir. Anyway, back to the original sugya, just a few lines to recap on the previous sugya. Tani Kavosida of Yehuda. In the previous sugya, we said that there is a prohibition to do hamro'o, to feed your animal in a way that's too strong, in a way that is a tircha and real strong, serious feeding, sometimes force feeding, is Asr and Shabbos. That's called hamro'o. While another type of feeding called hal'oto, like Yaakov did to Esav, hal'oto is allowed. And there was a machlokes how exactly to define hamra versus hal'oto. And Rav Yehuda was the one who said hamra means to push it, shove it down the throat of the animal to a point of no return, that the animal has it inside the system and can't spit it out. And that's not allowed. Too much of a tircha. The Rambam says it's too similar to regular feeding and it can't be over other isurim. While hal'ata means to feed it regular feeding. You feed it maybe strongly, but the animal can still spit it out. You feed it into the mouth, not down the throat. Here we see there was another opinion that said otherwise. The other opinion said that both hamra and hal'ata both are into the throat. One is with a hand, that's a more gentle one that's allowed. One with a spoon, that is not allowed. It's more professional tircha with a spoon. Now we see a brisa that supports the Amoiro Rav Yehuda. What does the brisa say? Eizo yamro veizo al-oto. What's called hamra, which is not allowed, and al-oto, which is allowed. Hamra is what? How do you do hamra? How do you do hamra? In 4 easy steps. How do you feed your cow? If you really wanted to eat well. Marbitza, you make it lie down, because when an animal is crouched, make it crouch, sit down. Marbitza, you let the animal sit and be crouched, or lying, because in that position the animal, cannot resist the food as much. Upoikis is piha, you mamish take a certain device, a chaka, some kind of device that forces the animal to keep its mouth open. And you feed it the karshinim, the animal food called vetches. You feed it the karshinim and water in one go, because when the water is mixed together with the karshinim, the whole stream, the whole whoosh of the food together with the water is washing down the system, and the animal just has it there. That's it. There's no choice. And it's not called tzar ba'alechaim, apparently. Hal'ota. What's hal'ota? How do you define hal'ota? Machila me'umad. The animal is standing, is in a standing position, and that position, the animal can potentially resist the food, and you feed it that way. Umashka me'umad, and you let it drink also while the animal standing. V'notzin kalshinim b'fnei atzman, umayim b'fnei atzman. And you give kalshinin and water, each one separately. The kalshinin, the solids alone, water alone by itself, and therefore the animal has the ability to resist, and such feeding is allowed on Shabbos because that's not called tircha. I don't have to start all these acrobatics of making it lie and push it down the throat and what. No, start regular feeding is fine. Of course, you're supposed to feed your own animal on Shabbos. We only said yesterday, and we'll say again, the only animals you're allowed to feed on Shabbos are your own animals, mezoinoisam alecha. Animals that depend on you for food, you're supposed to feed on Shabbos. Animals that are not yours and are not supposed to be fed by you, you cannot feed your neighbor's dog unless the neighbor left for a weekend vacation and he told you to do dog sitting, then of course he's depending on you. But other than that, you cannot feed, animals in the petting corner, in the little zoo, whatever, on Shabbos. Oh, now we're about to enter the very interesting sugya of lash. Lisha is one of the very detailed melachas of Shabbos, and we're going to give a little introduction, and then Be'ezras Hashem, hopefully get some clarity on the melacha of lash. Lash means kneading, one of the first 11 melachas of Shabbos. The melacha of lash. What happens when somebody kneads the dough? Kneads with a K, not needs love. Kneads the dough. What happens then? The flour and the water are mixing together, and the water sticks everything together, all the little pieces of flour, the grains, and that makes it into the powder, and the water together become one mass, one new entity that's viscous, that's nice, that is all one dough, one piece. So, however, a tolda, or possibly the rabbanon, that's already a question. What happens when you make egg salad on Shabbos, egg and mayonnaise? You have small pieces of egg and you mix some mayonnaise. Of course, it doesn't really create the same viscous, homogeneous kind of isa, of dough, but at the end of the day, again, here you have many small pieces. These are the small pieces of egg that are all connected together, making one mass of what? Of something new that's stuck together through the mayonnaise. So again, we're not learning halacha l'maisa here. Lash is a complicated melacha. You have to ask a rav, but this sugya will shed a lot of light on the concepts of lash. So we have two levels of lash. There's lash with something that really becomes one homogenic, united piece of a mass dough, like the water and flour. And there's mixing, let's say the Gemara says in Daf Yud Ches, the first sugya of lash in Shabbos, let's say you take ashes and you wet the ashes and you mix them with water, they do become one, but not the same as dough. Yeah, they don't really have the chemical reaction. They don't really become one big thing. Yeah. So, and also, even when it comes to the dough itself, there are two stages by Lisha. When you just pour water on flour, they're never going to be the same again. The flour already begins to stick. There's some kind of real chemical reaction. I remember once learning about it. There's actual chemical reaction in the flour. It's not stuck together because it's close together. Something really is happening to the flour when it's touched by water. It will never be dry, and there's point of no return. However, it did not yet become a real mushy, one nice mess. It's just water that's touching and affecting the flour, but it's not yet the nice, viscous, soft dough with your challah of Shabbos in mind. So there are two stages. There's wetting it, and then there is kneading it, mamish, actively making it into one nice mess. Amar Abaye, when I say mess, I mean M-A-S-S, not M-E-S-S. At the beginning, it's mess, then it's mess. Amar Abaye, says Abaye, what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said, I'm now scrolling up to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that ein nois nin mayim lemursan avaloi goivlin, right? You're allowed to place and pour water onto the mursan, but you can't knead it together. Now, mursan is the part of the wheat that's cheap, that's meant for animals. It's one of the chaffs, one of the covers of the peels, the thin peel of the grain that usually stays in the napa, says the Mishnah Brura. It stays in the sieve when you sift the flour or the chita. It stays on top, meaning it's something very cheapy and something not of high quality, and you can mix it with the water, but it will never really be the same as real flour. And it's usually fed to animals. Oh, Malkin to Negoilin, we're just starting now the sugya of Lisha. Weiter. Omar Abaye. I want to thank my friend Aaron Yaakov, who today, together with me, we he helped me a lot in understanding the sugya. One of the complicated sugyas is lash. It appears in different places in Shabbos. Every time it's something else, the different contradictions. So he helped me get a lot of things through. And we looked up the Mishnah Berurah also. Amar Abaye, says Abaye, Amrisa Kamei Demar. I said to Mar, usually when Abai says Mar, he means Rabbah, his first rabbi. Abai says, I spoke to Rabbah about the sugya, and I told him, Masnisin Mani, who does our Mishnah follow? What did our Mishnah say again? Our Mishnah said that the mursan, this kind of the chaff of the wheat, yeah, you're allowed to take the water and pour, and just have the water touching that mursan, but you can't mix it. Who does that? Who believes in that? Who is the one who believes that if I just have the water and the flour touching without mixing them, who says that this is something that's okay to do? Look at the Mishnah. Who allows such a thing? Vomali, Rabbi told me it's really a machloikes, and our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yossi bar Yehudahi. Our Mishnah follows the opinion of Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. The Tanya, it says in the Brisa. What happens if two people are partners in crime on Shabbat? One person brought into the table flour. He didn't do anything bad. The other person, criminal number two, what did he do? He poured water onto the flour, and that's it. Nobody actually mixed it, yeah? Nobody did the kneading. They just had the water touching the flour, so this chemical reaction. It becomes, like this disgusting gooey thing, but it's not mixed together. Says Ha'achron Chayev Divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says, Mr. Number Two, the one who poured the water is already Chayev. Even though there's no gibul, there's no mixing, just the actual touch, that's already called lisha. Something happened here. That's something, call it whatever you want, that kind of touch, that contact between the water and the flour, Yandik, according to Rebbe, you're chayiv. That's mamash like we saw Daf Yud Ches many moons ago. Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda Omer, and chayiv ad gabel. Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda says no. Says Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda arguing in Rebbe. He says no. You only chayiv until you megabel. What's megabel? Until you mix the whole thing together. Just the point of touch between the flour and water, that's not a reason to be mechayiv. And therefore, our Mishnah works very well, like Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. Why? Because he said that as long as there's no mixing, proper mixing together, you're not chayav on lash. And therefore, when the animal needs it, it's okay. Yeah, the Mishnah said you're allowed to pour the water onto the flour. You could argue there should be Isur D'Rabbanan. We're going to talk a lot about Isur D'Rabbanan later, but at least, this works better, according to Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, that as long as you just pour it without mixing it, just stage one, and not stage two, that's still okay. What? Yeah, the thing with the two people this time. Yeah, of course. It doesn't really make a difference. I don't know why the Mishnah spoke about two different people. Yeah. Zog the Gemara, wait a second. Now the Gemara is asking, this is all very nice, that's what Rabbah said, but how do you know? Maybe you can differentiate between Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda in this case and our Mishnah, which was a different case, meaning Dilma, maybe Ad kan lo koma Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda hosom. Only over there, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda said what he said in the story of the two people with flour and water. El kemach de bar gibul. Oh, now you appreciate the introduction. Kemach is bar gibul. Remember what I told you before? Bar gibul means it's really mixable, meaning kemach is something that if you knead it with the dough, into dough, the dough will be nice, good, a whole new creation, nice and fluffy and viscous. Aval mursan, the lav bar gibul. Mursan, which is that cheapy kind of garbagey kind of flour, it's never going to really be misgabel. It will never mix properly into one homogenic mess. So such a case, maybe maybe in such a case, Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda would say, no, listen, because it's not bar gibul, there's no point of mixing, because as much as going to mix and mix and mix and knead, it's never going to become real dough. So maybe the Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda agrees and admits to Rabbi that just pouring is already chayev. It will never become real gibul, real dough. There's a saying in English, the goldfish will never become a shark. Yeah, you're just never going to get there. Which now this is that's very bad news, because if we follow our point right now, our Mishnah doesn't make sense, because the Mishnah said that it is okay by Musan, right, to have the water and flour together. So if Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda, even if he doesn't believe in that, then our Mishnah doesn't follow anybody. Our Mishnah is orphaned. So what's the story? Nice idea, but no, we reject that. The Tanya Behedya, it says in the Brisa clearly, En nois nin mayim lemulsan divrei Rebbe. Mulsan, it's exactly the same achloikes, but instead of kemach, it talks about mulsan, which is not bar gibul. Mulsan is not mixable, will never be nice homogenic, and yet the same achloikes, ein nois nin mayim lemulsan divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says you're not allowed to put water and mursan together because Rebbe does not need the second stage. The first stage, that's already bad news, according to Rebbe, just having them together. Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda says you are allowed to put the water with the mulsan together, which is exactly our Mishnah. What you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to mix it further, according to Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda, which meaning even though it's not bar gibul, what I'm saying now, by the way, is Machlokes Rishonim, but I'm following some of the Rishonim. They say no, according to Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda, even thing that's not bar gibul, if you are megabel them to the best of your ability, you're chayev. But right now, you're not. By the way, I want to point out, ein nois man lemulsan sounds like it's the Rabbanon, and that's what we're going to say soon. But Lamaisa, so far, without yet going to question of the Rabbanon Doraisa, let's summarize what we have so far. So far, everything works very nicely. Rebbe, both when it comes to both whether it's kemach or mursan, whether it's bar gibul or not bar gibul, says Rebbe, the second the water and the solid, liquid and solid touch each other, bad news to one level or the other. Mashe'en ken, according to Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda, yeah, whether it's kemach or mursan, bar gibul, lav bar gibul, the first stage is not so bad, and therefore our Mishnah allows it. Yeah, only when you start mixing it properly together, then it's a problem. Like the Mishnah said, lo goivlin. So far, so good. Now, tono bonon. Now we're going to take it one step further. Another brisa says, "En goivlin is a kali." Kali is basically kemach kali karmel. It's mentioned many times in the Torah in Chazal. Kali is what's liklot, to roast. Let's say you took some grains of wheat, and you roast them. You roast them on the pan in the tanur liklot, kliat bereshit, right? You roast them, and then you make kemach out of them. You grind them into flour, and they become very sweet. It's nice, and it's considered like a delicacy. The only thing is that this kind of item, the kali, is not bar gibul. I guess it's harder because it's been already kalui, and they've roasted. So now that kemach is thicker, I assume that's what it looks, yeah? And it's very normal to make some kind of food out of it called shtita. Remember the name, we're going to have it later. Remember now, kemach kali is very good for the recipe of called shtita. Shtita is kemach kali, together with Rashi says shemen, mayim, and melach. Oil, water, salt, and then also vinegar afterwards, and you mix it together, and that's how you do it. That's kind of sweet, that's a nice delicacy, but it doesn't mix so nicely. Says the Braisa, ein goivlin es kali, ve'eshamrim goivlin. Some people say you're not allowed to mix the kali and the liquids that come with it, and some say you are allowed to mix them together. Now that's a chiddush, right? Because so far, nobody ever said you're allowed to mix. Mixing? That was never allowed, right? All we allowed, according to Rabbi Yisrael Bar Yehuda, is to place it, to pour. But to mix mamish, that's already crossing a red line. You're allowed to take that thing which is not bar gibul and mix it together. Okay. Man yesh omrim, says the Gemara, asks the Gemara, that's interesting. Who is the one that tells you that you are allowed to mix the kali with the liquids? By the way, I'm saying liquids on purpose because the Mishnah Berurah says, be aware that lisha is not only with water. Yeah, could be with oil, mayonnaise. They're going to get today, right? Salad with mayonnaise is a question. I'm not saying not to do it, but it's shaila, yeah? Or all these liquids that we have today, ketchup, honey, yeah, you have to know. Lisha applies to all of that. In this case, yeah, it's vinegar. Later on, we'll see. Man Yeshomrim, who's the one that says it's okay to mix it? Omav Chizda, Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda is the one who allows it. Why? Says Rashi, because Rebbe for sure wouldn't allow it. Why? Rebbe would tell you the second it touched each other is treif. Yeah, whether it is what? Bar Gibul or Bar Gibul. Rebbe's out of the picture. the second it's Nogea, out. But Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, he only cares about what? About Gibul. So according to him, the Gibul is still debatable. And in this case, he says you're allowed to do the Gibul. But still, why? Right? Beforehand, we said that he does not allow Gibul. Our Mishnah said, excuse me, that you can't take Mursan and Kali are similar. Right? They're both harder. They're both not bar Gibul. They're not nice and soft. And in the Mishnah, we said mixing is not allowed. How come he's allowing here to mix them together? Here we come to the big story. It's only allowed because you do it b'shinui. Oh, which means, well, let's first translate. The reason why it's allowed lechatchila is because you do mixing with shinui. Rabbeinu, kuf nun vav amud aleph, the second line, top of the page. Heichem eshani, what kind of shinui are you supposed to do? Yeah, how are you supposed to make it different and crazy and abnormal to make it allowed, permitted? Which means you're supposed to pour it slowly, bit by bit. Yeah, slowly is allowed. Let me explain what's going on over here. There's the machlokes hashonim here, and again, I don't want to give you too many shittas because we'll only confuse everybody here. So again, me, maybe not you. Let's follow the Rambam and be pashut. Yeah, machlokes Rambam, Tosfos, each one has like gazillion rishonim on his side. Says the Rambam something very, very simple. Anything that is Einoy bar gibul, right? It's harder. It's not it's like bigger pieces. Yeah, and you mix it with water, it will never mix nicely. It's not bar gibul. It's only also with the Rabbanon. Rabbanon invented the idea that it's also. Okay. So Rabbanon can also tell you that they allow you to do it b'shinui. True, normally shinui is not allowed, right? But Rabbanon have the right to tell you, we invented this as the Rabbanon. Now we're telling you, if you did b'shinui, we're okay with that. Not every shinui. We're going to see today and tomorrow 3 types of shinui. Shinui is the name of the game by lash. Lash has a lot to do with shinui, more ledaiti more than any other melacha. Yeah, only here we're going to 3 shinuim, but there's even more. So when you pour it very slowly, bit by bit, yeah, you pour the thing and you mix. You pour and you mix like crazy, very, very small amounts every time. Mishnah Berurah says he doesn't know what's the shear of the small amount, but it has to be stop and start and stop and start. That matzav is considered such a strong shinui, plus that it's the Rabbanon, and that's why it's allowed. Okay? Why didn't the Mishnah say it? The Mishnah didn't talk about shinui. The Mishnah spoke about a guy who's doing gibul all together. When you do the gibul all together, instead of bit by bit, that's also. But you do it b'shinui, bit. Every time you pour another bit of water or vinegar, whatever the liquid, and you mix, you pour and you mix. You do it like slow motion, stop and start and stop and start. That's allowed because the whole thing is abundant. Only in what? Only davar ain't about gibul. But by regular flour, let's not lose cheshbon. This gives a lot of cheshbon, like smart guys like you. Everybody in this room has a very good name, yeah? So now what? Yeah, aliyad. What happens with flour? It's not going to help. With kemach, flour, no. Because it's bar gibul. For bar gibul, this shinui doesn't help. What? To do shinui. You can't bake challah with the shinui on Shabbos. You can't knead the challah dough on Shabbos and do it slowly because it's mamish deoraisa. It's bar gibul, okay? Now, no, because you're kneading it. You're lash, lalush. You're kneading. That's also, anyways, yeah. Zog the Gemara, another quote, Vishavin, another brisa that says, Vishavin sheboichin thashotis b'Shabbos. Remember, I told you what shotis? Shotis is the next stage of the kali. Look what it says here. It says, what's shavin? Shavin means everyone agrees. Everyone agrees. You're allowed to mix boichin the shotis b'Shabbos, right? You're allowed to mix the dough of the kali on Shabbos. Okay? And the shoisim zeisum amitzri. You're allowed to drink zeisum amitzri. Zeisum amitzri is a health kind of drink. It's a mixture of kurkum and kurkum is turmeric, I think in English, and salt and flour of soirim. And even though it's healthy, it's not called a medication. Anything that's not called medication, you can take on Shabbos. Let's leave that aside. Frag the Gemara in the first part. You telling me that everyone agrees you're allowed to mix shotis v'Shabbos? Lamata en goivlin. What are you talking about? We just saw a second ago a brisa that says that according to Rebbe, you're not allowed to. Remember, that business of doing the shinui of slowly, bit by bit, al yad, is what? That was only said by Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda. Rebbe never allowed it. How can you tell me everyone agrees? No, not everyone agrees. Yeah? Zog the Gemara, another factor which I didn't tell you before. Lo kasha, ho be'ava, ho be'raka. Oh, that's another huge inyan in what? In Lisha. Blila ava versus blila raka. Blila ava means when you have real dough that's thick, viscous and thick, like a dough, like the dough of the challah of Shabbos, of the bread. Raka, blila raka, is something that pours, yeah? In other words, it's not as soft and runny like coffee or Materna, yeah, the baby formula. You have a baby, right? Yeah, I don't know what to give your baby, but yeah, you know they have the baby formula, but then they add an extra thick daisa, right? Porridge to it sometimes when the baby is older. That's blila raka, meaning it's thick, but it's not as thick as dough. Yeah, it's like a drink. The baby drinks it, but it's a bit thicker. That's called blila raka. Blila raka me'ikar adin is not, there's no lisha to blila raka. Blila ava, the thick one, like batzek. That is blila ava, that's doraisa. Blila raka, meaning the more runny, the more dalil, the more runny one, that is not osum doraisa. And therefore, when you goivel blila raka, when you make it you add a lot of drink, a lot of liquid to make it very runny, then it's only osur midorabanan, and therefore, when you goivel, it's allowed to be goivel, you're allowed to mix it. However, vanimili hu demeshani. We just said it's also dorabanan. So how come it's allowed? You have to do shinui. In other words, when it's blila raka, even Rebbe agrees, but blila raka, even Rebbe agrees, blila raka is a weaker dorabanan. Blila raka is not real kneading. It's a drink. The baby drinks it. Yeah, and therefore, even Rebbe agrees that the shinui helps. What kahechid meshani? What kind of shinui? Amar Yosef. Here's shinui number 2. Amar Yosef bechol nosen esachoymetz v'achakach nosen esashatis. If in a weekday first you put the vinegar and then you put the shotis, that flour, the kali, the Shabbos, in Shabbos you switch the order and first you put the shotis and then the choimetz. Okay, switch the order. In other words, for blila raka, everyone agrees the shinu is okay. Blila raka is again. Let's repeat. Let's revise. I wish we had more time because we really are a bit pressed for time. See you next Wednesday, guys. See you next Wednesday evening in my house. Everyone's invited. Please come. Yeah. So let's at least revise what we have. Machlokes Rebbe and Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda. Rebbe is always more machmir. You have it together. That's already osur. Even if you didn't mix them, right? The flour and the water touching is osur. Now, what happens if you have something that's not bar gibul? At the beginning, says Rebbe, I don't care. It's still osur. When you blila raka, it's also midorabanan, but still also. Now, when you blila raka, meaning if the mixture altogether, the final result is something much more runny than the regular dough, then the issa dorabanan is weaker, and then even Rebbe agrees that it is really mutter to do it with the shinui. Okay? Very good. My neighbor is a genius. I always knew that. Very good. According to Rebbe Bar Yehuda, at least from what we see in our Gemara, no difference between Ava and Raka. As long as it is Loi Bar Gibul, it's the Rabbanon, and you're allowed to do it b'shinui. Very good. I wish we had more time. We're so much in the middle of the sugya, but I have to daven Ma'ariv, and so do you. And the next piece will be the third kind of shinui. Okay, so tomorrow I think tomorrow should start 9:05, if not before. I know you can't. We're not gonna make it, and I promised the shul I'm gonna give another share ready on Thursday. We have to finish by Tuesday. Maybe we'll have an extra share Wednesday. I don't know. I don't know what we'll do. But Bekitzer, we have to be here tomorrow 9:05. I mean, I hope you can. I'll be here 9:05. Beseder, yeah, I'm talking, and I am aware that people watch me in Torah anytime, and everyone Torah anytime should also be here. Okay. Beseder. So tomorrow we'll continue the sugya of Lisha, and tomorrow we're going to have a very interesting Aggadah about Ein Mazel Yisrael. You know the famous line everybody says? Tomorrow we're going to talk about astrology, the stars and the mazalos, how they affect your life. If you're born under certain stars, what's your fate? What's your story? What's your character? Stay tuned. Stay with us. Atzlachu v'rocha. Thank you to everybody here.